everybody, and welcome to another edition of T and Friends Watch a Scary Movie. Joining me today is the founder of the blogging Banshee, a website focused on the horror genre. She has also written for Dread Central, Nightmare Conjurings, and Certified Forgotten. Very happy to have her on the show today. Y'all, please welcome Molly Henery. Molly, how are you today? Thank you so much for joining us.
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited.
No, I am so amped to have you here on the show. I was lucky enough to kind of get in contact with you about a month or so ago, and after seeing a lot of your work over like the last like few years on like random sites I'll be reading and everything, it's like, oh, that's like super cool. And I definitely want to take the opportunity to get you brought on because I'm trying to get some really, really good and cool voices in horror on the show for this summer. And I was like, yep, let's get Molly. Got to get her on now.
Yes. Well, thank you. Like I said, I'm very excited to be on. And also have to say, I'm obsessed with your setup that you have. It's so cool. And it's making me extra sad that all of my stuff is in storage right now.
Well, you were saying like it's usually like wall to wall in like in your place as well too. I am so curious though because like obviously I mean it's hard to really ignore like the pinball table now and everything. But what for you was like your most like valued horror possession that you have like
Oh.
either in your home, in your office, in your car? What would you say for you is like that's the one thing you think of when it comes to your collectibles or posters or whatever now?
Yeah, it's really difficult because there are so many posters and things that I have like emotional attachments to as well.
Uh-huh.
But honestly, probably the one thing that I have that's my favorite thing, and it's so random. And it's actually funny because I was just talking about this movie earlier today with someone. So you know the French film Raw,
Yeah.
the cannibal one. Okay.
Hmm.
So when that came out, I went to an advanced screening for it, and they were giving out like I had got like a little poster that they were giving out but then they also had T-shirts. I'm so sad that I don't have it to show you because it's in the storage unit, but
Ah.
it's I'll send you a picture afterwards because I know I have pictures on my phone. But it's basically I to this day don't know what the shirt looks like because the way they have it packaged like a steak. So it's like
Huh.
in the styrofoam thing with the
Okay.
plastic cover over it. And it's
Yeah.
like the shirt is folded into a shape of a steak. And I assume the picture on top is what the t-shirt is, but I will never know because I'm not going to open it. But the picture on top of the folded shirt is the steak that says raw on top. And just like the way they have it packaged is so freaking cool, and it's something that I continually will like try to find on eBay and stuff just so I can see if anyone has opened it or anything.
Yeah.
And I've never seen this item listed anywhere. So it's just like the most random thing, but the packaging is just so clever, and I love that they made it look like a piece of meat, and it'll always be one of my favorite things that I have.
God, that sounds super, super rare then, because if you're not
Yeah.
seeing it on like
Yeah.
eBay or anything, yeah. Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it because I think like the more obscure it is, honestly, like the more fun it is to have because you're probably not going to run into somebody else who actually has that.
Yeah.
So you get to have that badge of honor. That's so cool. I love it. I love it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I want to dive right into it with you. Recently I had Heather Wixon on this show, who's one of my
Mhm.
favorite voices in horror out there. And she mentioned because she's getting out of the world of horror journalism, and she's
Mhm.
been doing it for quite a while at this point. And she had talked about how over her time in the business, she's seen so much change in terms of the voices that are now in this space and really able to shine a light on horror, whether it's movies, TV shows, books, actors, all every single facet of it at this point. And I'm curious because you've been doing this for a while, and I know that you tend to focus more on a lot of the unheard voices as well too. We're talking about women and the LGBTQIA plus people of color, and I'm just so curious over the years that you've been working in the field of horror journalism, what you yourself have seen when it's come to giving a space for these other voices out there.
Yeah, I think it's definitely something that we are seeing overall improvements with. And it's not just from the journalism standpoint, even just like the type of horror films that we're getting. We're getting such a wider, diverse range of voices in the genre. And it's amazing. And I love it. And I love that because we're getting a lot more diverse voices, I feel like it's kind of almost getting a little bit more respect than it has historically as well. I mean, even just like a few years ago, The Shape of Water won Best Picture at the Oscars, which is insane. And I think it's because I mean, Guillermo del Toro is obviously a Hispanic filmmaker, and he got to start with Spanish language films, and now he's making like these big blockbuster films that are well beloved. And he's one of my favorite directors, so naturally I would mention him. But even on the journalism space, I feel like because there are like a handful of really trusted horror outlets like Fangoria and Bloody Disgusting and Dread Central, they are working very hard to get a lot more diverse people lending their voices to analysis and reviews of these films. But I'll also tack on a caveat there, because there is some things that are not positive changes that I've noticed as well.
Okay.
I mean, and in terms of diversity, it's a big improvement. But I think honestly, and this might change now with a lot of the legislation happening, but I think in a lot of ways, TikTok has kind of been negatively impacting this space as well. Because we're getting a lot of people going to premieres and stuff where they're TikTokers, they're influencers, and that's amazing. And I think it's great that they're able to like have a career from that. But it makes it so people like myself, who are writers, who don't constantly put their faces out there, it makes it a lot harder for us to get our voices out there. And I'm sure there are a lot of people that are in similar situations to myself, where it's like, I've been doing this for almost 10 years now, and there are people who just started it in the past like 2 months that all they do is TikTok or whatever, and they're getting opportunities that I probably would never even dream of. So like there's
Yeah.
there's a caveat to that. It's something that the industry is constantly changing as well. So again, like with the legislation, we could see a dramatic shift with that soon. Um, but I will say one of the positives with that is that a lot of the people who are getting a lot of these opportunities through TikTok are more diverse voices as well, which is great. Like there's some people that I follow who are LGBTQIA plus, or various creators who are people of color that have been able to like create these awesome inclusive spaces within their social media and be included and lend their voices, which is amazing. And I love that part of it. It's just as a writer, a lot of it makes me feel like I'm doing a lot for nothing. So there's layers to that, and it's an industry that's constantly changing. So it's a lot about adapting too. But I do think places are at least trying to create more diversity, but I think that there's obviously always room for improvement. Even I just heard a thing since I'm stuck on TikTok now. I just heard the story about a creator who is a queer woman. She's Black, and she went to this creator thing, was invited to this dinner, and it ended up being a catastrophe. Like the wait staff like actively wasn't serving the food to the women of color in the room, which is insane that is still happening.
Yeah, to say the least.
Yeah. So it's weird that she has enough of a platform that she would be invited to something like this, but then to be completely disrespected. But then again, also it's great that she has such a huge following, so she can bring this up and talk about it and get it out there that this is still an issue, and let brands and studios know that people aren't going to just let stuff like this happen. In this day of social media, there's no way you're going to get away with stuff like that.
Not at all, not at all. And I'm so curious because, you talk about how, like, with the recent legislator that's out there, that TikTok's facing a ban right now.
Mm-hmm.
In your head, do you see any way to kind of bridge that gap a bit? Because I definitely get that. There has been such a rise over the last few years of TikTok reporting and TikTok journalism compared to what we're used to, and seeing articles on a lot of websites and blogs and things like that. Do you have an idea of what could bridge that gap, or something that you'd at least like to see maybe arise from that space to get away from one extreme or the other? Is there anything in your mind that you think could bridge that easily?
It's difficult to say. I mean, for me personally, I try to bridge it at least a little bit where obviously my focus is on writing, but I'll usually at least do like short little TikToks giving a very, very brief overview of my thoughts on the film, but then still encouraging people to go actually read the review. So I won't include a lot of the more specific details. I usually have like a number rating in my review as well. I won't say what the number rating is when I do my TikTok and stuff. So it's an attempt to kind of bridge that gap. I don't know if it works, but I certainly try. But I think that there are a lot of platforms that do kind of combine those. Like I know a lot of people will use things like Discord or I'm blanking on what it's called now, but it's the not nude version of OnlyFans kind of thing for subscriptions. Why am I blanking on what it's called?
Oh, Patreon. There it
Yes,
is,
thank
right?
you.
Yeah. Yep.
So I know
Took me a
a lot of
sec.
people use that. So it's like it's something where they can kind of do lots of different kind of multiple different types of platforms and have video, have writing, have live stuff. So I think there are ways of bridging that gap. It's just a matter of if you have the bandwidth for it, because that's always my thing. It's I have ADHD. I have motivation issues. So getting to writing is already a big deal for me. So the idea of having to do all these other things on top of that just to get eyes on my writing is exhausting, but it's part of the hustle, you know.
Yeah.
You gotta hustle and you gotta grind and you gotta create a platform for yourself. And it's unfortunate that there are so many different types of medias that we have to do this on, just to get eyes on stuff. But I understand that that's also just kind of the way of technology and how things change. You just got to roll and adapt with it as much as you can.
Yeah, and speaking of your writing, there's a series that you've been doing for a while that I'm a big fan of called Uterus Horror that talks a little bit about the experience of as you described, growing up with a female gender expression. And I'm curious, like, what brought about that particular like series of articles for you? Because I think it's fascinating, honestly, and for a genre that is very, very much made off the backs of women, you would think that there would be more of this kind of writing and this kind of interest in looking at horror movies through that scope there. But your series, see, it covers so much in a number of the articles that you've written for this series. And I'm so curious, like, what brought this about? Why did this end up being kind of like the flagship series for what you've put out there online in the last few years?
Yeah, it's funny. It was actually an internet meme that kind of sparked this for me, which sounds so stupid. But it was back, I think the year just before the pandemic hit. There was that meme that was all over. I'm sure it was everywhere, but I mostly remember it on Twitter, where it was like the cartoon, uh, like high school lunchroom, and people would put different
Ooh.
groups of things at each table, and you had to decide which table you'd sit at. There was one like that where one of the tables had Carrie, Ginger Snaps, and Jennifer's body. And
Ah.
immediately I was like, that's my table. but
Yeah,
then
yeah.
but then it also like kind of clicked for me. Like obviously I with a lot of them I had noticed the similarities between them, but seeing them grouped together kind of really was like the spark that was like, oh wait, there are actually quite a few of these films that are in this as of yet undefined subgenre where it's the experiences of young women when they're going through puberty or experiencing love for the first time or discovering their sexuality and things like that. And with women in the horror space, I feel like the focus is so much on the idea of the final girl. And I love the idea of the final girl. Wow, I can't talk final girl. Started speaking like Popeye there for a second. and But this is something a little different. And a lot of people get it confused with like pregnancy horror too, just because I used the term uterus entirely to piss men off. I'm going to be upfront with that. It was 100% to make men mad, and it
I
does.
like it.
But I also always specify that you don't necessarily to have a uterus to experience uterus horror. Like one of the films that I've written about was Sleepaway Camp. which if
Mm.
you've seen the movie, it's really old, but spoiler alert, like Angela was not born with a uterus.
Mhm.
So it's things like that where but obviously all of her experiences were from the perspective of being a woman. So I always say I include like transgender people, like non-binary people that maybe lean more towards femme. But when you think of coming of age stories, you also usually think of men. Like one of the biggest coming of age films of all time is Stand By Me, which is about a group of young guys kind of becoming adults as we watch the movie before our eyes. And so I wanted to focus on these films and I wanted to call it something other than coming of age films, specifically because it's usually you think of coming of age stories about or boys becoming men. So that's kind of where Uterus Horror came from. And it's like Ginger Snaps is my favorite horror film. And so I'm kind of obsessed. You know this, I've showed you. I have a tattoo for it and stuff. Like we talked about this, but it's definitely my favorite horror film. So I just being able to write about these films has been so awesome. And it's been such a weird journey too, because like initially this was pitched as a book, and then it was going to become a podcast, and then eventually it became monthly. I use monthly loosely because my brain sometimes doesn't work, but generally speaking, a monthly column. And it's originally was with Fangoria. Now it's at Certified Forgotten. And I love my editors at Certified Forgotten. They've been so amazing and supportive. And I just love being able to write about these films. And it's a subgenre that we're seeing a lot more of too. Like, because obviously I usually cite Carrie as the first one in the subgenre, even though there are older films that could be considered like the original Cat People, I would say
Mm.
could fit in this category as well. But it's something that really just in the past 10 years, I feel like we're seeing a lot more of those types of films. And I think it kind of speaks to the diversified voices. We're getting a lot more women who are writing, who are directing and stuff. So we're getting a lot more of those types of films that are from the feminine perspective, which I think is amazing. And I love these films. And I think they're also interesting in the different ways that they incorporate horror to either be a metaphor for the changes that these young women are experiencing, or as a way to kind of like enhance or exacerbate or make everything way more stressful. It's really interesting to see the ways that horror is incorporated into these stories, because it's also unique, whether it be a physical or emotional transformation. And it's definitely I'm not just saying this because it's a subgenre that I like made up the name for and defined, but it's generally like I love these films and it's probably one of my favorite subgenres of horror.
Is there something in the last like year or two? Because I feel like especially since the pandemic kind of came and it went lockdowns, all that stuff, I feel that like horror had this like not meteoric rise, but like definitely a bigger rise in the last 4 years than we had gotten maybe in the last decade, from whatever we want to say the most recent era was. Has there been something that's popped up to you in the last couple of years that's like really stood out to kind of fit into that category? Because you've written about so much, but anything recent in the last few years that's really just stood out to you?
Yeah, there's one that came out last year, Perpetrator,
Okay.
which is a Shudder original, and it was directed by, for sure, I'm pretty sure also written by Jennifer Reeder, who also did the movie Knives and Skin.
Mm.
And that's another one that I probably will eventually write about that one too. But Perpetrator was one that just like it really hit me when I saw it for the first time. And that like I said, I saw it a couple years ago for the first time, but I'm pretty sure last year was when it was released on Shudder. But within the past couple years, either way. And it's just this amazing story that shows like a girl in the eve of her 18th birthday, and then watching the changes that she goes through when she hits 18. And it's a lot of it comes, she has this basically like superhero type power, but it's rooted in empathy. She basically has a superpower that's extreme empathy that allows her to kind of take on the persona, the voice, and characteristics of people around her, but it also helps her solve a string of disappearances and murders that have been happening at her school. And I love that film, just the visuals. It's very surreal. Like a lot of people compare Reader's work to like David Lynch's work. It's kind of out there and cerebral. Um, but what I love is that empathy is often seen as a very feminine trait, and it's often looked down on. Like if you have too much empathy, how can you function or something? Like
Mm.
why should we care about other people? And so to have that be the focus of the film and have it be turned into a superpower, I think is such a clever way to show the strength that a lot of women have, and also kind of there's a lot of like sisterhood in it. Like this this isn't a power that someone should keep for themselves. It should be something that all women have so that they can not only be more connected with each other, but so they can protect themselves better. So it's a really great film. Highly recommend it. There's also some really interesting imagery in it as well that it's hard to explain without getting into spoilers. But I'll just
Hmm.
say there's a wound that looks a lot like a vagina, and the fact that it's a wound that looks like that that's on a man is I think a really interesting choice, and I love it.
I would say that's already saying a lot at that point.
Yeah.
Even
Like
without the spoilers. Wow. Okay.
yeah. It's definitely it's very out there, but and it also has Alicia Silverstone in it. She plays a really funny, bizarre character, um, who kind of like talks with like a transatlantic accent and stuff. She's very kooky in it. She's basically like what I imagine the living with the ants from like Sabrina would be like. Just like just kind of like this weirdo who like wears like very outdated clothes, and you're like, what era are you from, kind of thing. But yeah,
That, that is
it's a
very
good time.
telling. Okay.
Yes.
We're going to check that one out then. We're adding Perpetrator to the list, y'all. We're going to
Yes.
check that out on Shudder. All right. I'm loving
Yes.
it. And it's kind of interesting. I feel bad about having to turn things this way, but in a lot of what you talked about there with Uterus Horror and about coming of age stories and about the way that we see the world through like a certain lens, the movie that we're really discussing tonight, Arcadian, which hopefully
Mhm.
y'all have gotten a chance to see here, tells the story about a family of two boys and their dad who are seeking to
Mhm.
survive in a post-apocalyptic countryside where monsters seem to roam the countryside once night falls. You got a chance to check this one out actually at the Overlook Film
Mhm.
Festival, I believe, and you actually dropped a review about it that was honestly like very, very surprising to me. And I mean surprising in the best of ways because I think that a lot of people who aren't in the know would think that they look at like Nick Cage's career at this point and kind of
Mhm.
think that it's devolved into so much just direct to video like Treble. And I think that all of us in like the horror community have actually seen what the man's done over the last like decade in that space, and that there's
Yeah.
been some actual gems in that space of what he's been doing. And even you talked about it in your review that how surprised you were by the film that we got. And before we start
Mhm.
jumping into specifics, tell my viewers a little bit here about what you thought of Arcadian.
Yeah, I was really surprised by this one. And I will say I actually went into it almost 100% blind. I I knew that it was about a father and his two sons. I knew that it was some kind of post-apocalyptic thing, but I didn't read the synopsis. I didn't watch the trailer. I basically had one picture that I had seen from the film before going in, and that was it. So I really didn't know what to expect. And I was really surprised by this one because it's definitely one that I'm sure a lot of people are going to go in expecting a Nicolas Cage film. That's really not what you're going to get. Because he's in it and he's great in it, but it's a much more nuanced and subdued performance for him. And I think that was really smart because it again shows that he can do performances like that, because a lot of people say he can't, but he obviously can. But I also think that it's great because it allowed for the focus to be on the brothers and their relationship with their dad, with each other, as well as with the other people that they encounter. And it very much is, it's a coming of age story for these two kids, like they're teenagers. In one synopsis, I saw them referred to as twins. I don't remember them being referred to as twins in the film, so I don't know how I feel about that. So I'm just going to call them brothers.
Yeah, I thought
Yeah.
the same thing. It's like, no, 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 no. One's older. One's definitely different.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like they were both like babies, but they could have been like 9 months apart. It's
Yeah.
possible. So,
Hmm.
but yeah, and what I love about it is that it shows that even when you're in this kind of post-apocalyptic situation, you're trying to survive, puberty is still very much puberty. Like, and it's still going to hit you in the same way. So it's interesting to watch these brothers who are at kind of different stages of their life, and they also kind of are reacting to the situation they're in very differently. Whereas one has become very drawn into himself and does a lot of reading and is doing what he can and what he thinks he needs to do to help himself and his family survive. Whereas the other one very much is in his rebellious teen years. He wants to get away from this. He wants to interact with the people at the neighboring farm and stuff. And so I like that when you get all of that, you get all that really interesting character development before you even get into the horror part of it. And
Yeah.
and then when you get into the horror part of it, it's absolutely batshit crazy. Which I also love. Like, the creature design in this film is insane. There are honestly just like a couple nitpicky things that bug me about it. Like, there are a couple scenes that they show with the creatures that are shocking, but then in my head I'm like, I don't understand what's happening. What are they doing? You know,
Hmm.
I'm sure you might be thinking about
Yeah.
the same thing I'm thinking of, and it's, I don't want to do total spoilers or anything, but there's one specific scene where it's shocking and horrifying, but I'm also just like, I don't understand what's going on with that creature right there, and it's never
Yeah.
explained, and it bugs the crap out of me.
I very much, I said it in my review there, but like, man, these things, like, in the best of ways, almost reminded me of like the Krites from Critters in a
I thought
way.
the same thing.
Okay, okay, I'm not crazy then. I was like, yeah, like, and I know there's one specific thing that we won't spoil, but like, if anybody has seen Critters 2, there is very, very much one specific thing that's like, how can that not be a Critters 2 callback? It seems like
Yeah.
they're pulling that from Critters 2, but they very much seem to have like, not like maybe the joking personality, but I don't know a better way to really describe the action of these creatures in there. And I agree. Like, the design of the monsters themselves was so interesting, but it
Mm-hmm.
also left it to where there was just parts where it's like, yeah, I don't know what you're doing right now, because it's very clear that if you guys have the capacity and the brain power and the thinking power to do all this, how come it's taken this long to happen? And why does it take these specific people to kind of trigger all this bad shit to start occurring in the first place? I don't know. I
Yeah.
don't know. Um, and I love what you say about the family unit as well too, because it's funny because I was under the impression that they were supposed to be twins as well, but it's like that doesn't make any sense if they are. And I know twins technically don't have to be born at the exact like same time or anything, but it's like clearly the older brother, played by Maxwell Jenkins, is, like you said, he's going through puberty. He's more
Yeah.
interested in girls and getting to do his own thing and getting away from his family. And post apocalypse or not, he's still very much a teenage boy, like feeling all the things that a teenage boy does.
Mm-hmm.
Where his younger brother, played by Jaden Martell, is very much still doting on their dad, and they got to do what dad says. We're gonna do everything that dad says the right way. And if anything, I thought that made, like, Nick Cage's character all the more interesting, because there's multiple times in this movie to where he kind of takes all the blame on himself. Like, something goes
Mm-hmm.
wrong, and he's very clear about, no, that's on me. Like, that's not on you
Yeah.
guys. Like, it's whatever. And I found that, like, it's so nuanced. It's so nuanced, and you're absolutely right. It's like Nick Cage can do these performances, but like we don't get a lot of these roles for him these days.
Yeah. Everyone wants the big Nick Cage freak out, but honestly, sometimes it's better when he's not doing the big Nick Cage freak out. But I think
Yeah.
that's interesting too, because like I think that it's an interesting situation from the dad's point of view, because he understands more than the kids do, because he obviously, they're at the beginning they're like babies, and then we jump 15 years ahead and now they're teenagers. So he was around before the end of the world happened. He was there when it was happening, and now he's kind of seen all versions of it. And I think that because he understands that even though they're in this situation, they're still just teenage boys. I think that he gets that whatever happens, ultimately it's his responsibility. He's the dad. Like, he can trust them to a certain extent, but they're also kids, you know? And I feel like it's rare that we see that, especially in like post-apocalyptic films like this. Normally they're expected to act like adults and they're
Yeah.
expected to grow up way too fast. And I think that it's a combination of him wanting, I think it's probably partly trying to keep the peace just because it's the three of them living there. And if a fight happens or something, that's obviously going to cause issues with the small family unit. But I think it's also he's trying to teach them the survival skills while also still letting them be kids. And that was such an interesting thing that I thought is not something that we normally see from this kind of film. So it's funny because I normally, if it's a monster movie, I am always going to be team monsters, but this is one of the few times where I wasn't team monster because we got to know these characters so well before we even saw the smallest glimpse of one of the monsters. So I think that was really clever.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I think anybody who sees this would be able to easily pick out at least a couple of films similar. I think obviously the Quiet Place series really stands out as
Mm-hmm.
being similar to this. Um, and but it's also so incredibly different because like you said, like we get to actually see this relationship with this family unit just continue to grow and be strained, and like what they've been through and what they're trying to do and their connections like with other people they stumble across and other farms. And like, the Quiet Place movies are very much about isolation, and you can't
Mm-hmm.
talk, you can't really live the way that the old world was set up. Another film, It Comes at Night, which, depending on where you stand on
Mm-hmm.
that, is very good or very bad. But another one that's a little bit closer to what Arcadian was doing here, to where it's very much about, again, a family unit like trying to fight off whatever's going on outside of their home, and boys will be boys and girls will be girls and everything. And we don't get that. We just simply don't get that a
Mm-hmm.
lot, to where we get to see these relationships born, get to like be formed and build and actually feel genuine. And like even the relationship between Jenkins' character and the young girl that he's
Mm-hmm.
interested in at the neighboring farm too. The fact that that only came across as like like somewhat cheesy in certain places, but even then, like, it felt so genuine. And I feel we don't get a lot of that, or a lot of those relationships depicted in these kinds of movies
Mm-hmm.
typically.
Yeah, especially because like it felt very much like a teenage crush. Whereas I feel like in most post-apocalyptic, it's like I am so in love with you and I would die for you. And it's like, they're kids. They're not actually going to be thinking that way. So
Yeah.
I made it more realistic in a lot of ways. And it is interesting that you point out the neighboring farm and stuff, because this is something that I didn't write about in my review, but it's something that I just, as I thought about the film more, I thought was interesting. And I don't know if this was an intentional thing that the filmmaker did, but it felt very much to me that as we're watching these people, they're all so isolated from each other. We have Nick Cage and his kids, their farm. There's the neighboring farm that has a handful of people. But they, aside from the son who goes there to help out sometimes, mostly because he wants to hang out with the only teenage girl in the area, it's they don't really interact. And we see at one point that they don't want to mix the groups. And what I think is interesting is that's kind of the opposite of what we see from the monsters in it. They very much work as a unit at all times. And I think that kind of speaks to, to me, it felt like the message that the filmmaker was trying to send is that the reason that human civilization fell so easily is because we are so separated from each other. Like, we hate people for the stupidest reasons, like who they want to be with or the color of skin or whatever, like hating people for that, and like divisions with countries and governments and stuff. And that is probably ultimately what led to the downfall of humanity. Whereas you have these creatures who very much, they're monsters, but they work together as a unit. And that's why they were able to destroy human civilization, is because we're, as humans, not able to do that. So I think that was also an interesting that they had element that they had. And I think that by focusing on the brothers too, it kind of highlighted that when they work together, they can survive. But if they are separated and they aren't working together, who knows what's going to happen to them. And it was a really interesting thing that, like, again, I didn't even really pick up on it until like weeks later as I'm thinking about the movie more.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of nuance to this film that I really appreciate. I feel like it's one of those ones that every time you watch it, you're going to notice different things about it.
Yeah. And I'm so curious because I mean, you mentioned about the fact that it's very possible that the filmmaker is trying to say something here that we see very clearly the monsters work together. They get a lot further in their various attacks and obviously dominating human civilization. Humans aren't doing the same. That's where we are right now. There's been a lot of talk in the last few months in Hollywood about how movies and TV show don't necessarily need to have all these messages and don't need to be preachy and all this subtext and everything. And I, I, I obviously that can't be true because I think that entertainment is obviously way more entertaining when it's closer to home and you can actually relate to that. But do you feel, especially in the genre of horror, to where sometimes you really do just need to turn off your brain? Do you think that that's something that we should be seeing more or less of, to where we're just getting movies that do have these deeper meanings in the horror genre, or should it just all be fluff and popcorn, really?
I think that horror as a genre has always been a very politically heavy genre. And so there are plenty of films out there that are just kind of fun popcorn. Like if you want something that you don't really have to use your brain very much, there are options out there and there always will be. But I don't think it's necessarily something where there needs to be more of it. I think that by not having it be something constant, it makes the ones that are like that kind of stand out a little bit more and they're a bit more fun. Like one that comes to mind is like Velocipaster. There's
Yeah.
no political message in there. At least I've only seen it once, but at least not that I remember. But it's ridiculous and it's fun. Or like Killer Clowns from Outer Space. Not really a message in there other than the very common message in most horror films that cops don't know how to do their job. Other than that, there's not really a lot of message or theme in that other than just being fun. So there are definitely options out there, but like I said, I think horror is something that has always been political, even if it's not overtly. It's something that at least speaks to the socio-political climate at the time that it was made. And so I think that that's something that you can't really escape from. And I also don't think that people really should. It doesn't have to be overt either. Like you can, if you want something overt, you can watch Civil War, not a horror movie, but like it's pretty horrific, so it's adjacent.
Yeah, close enough. Yep.
like so there are things that are way more overt, but there are also a lot of things that are more subtle that people can interpret in different ways. Like Scream is still very much a political film at the core, but it's also like a fun popcorn movie. It's a fun slasher. I don't think the two things have to be mutually exclusive. Sorry, I'm just covered in animals that all want to move around right now.
It's all good. And I love that because that's the truth of it, y'all. I mean, I don't think that there really does have to be an either or because, like you're
Mm-hmm.
saying, we get so much of that throughout the year, and it's possible to do it for both. So those who are calling for less of these voices being heard and statements being
Yeah.
said, we can't have less of that. We need more than that than ever these days.
And
Well,
it's also funny because I feel like most of the movies that people cite as like being before horror was political are usually the most political horror
oh
films.
God, yes.
It's
Oh my
like I
God.
once had someone try to tell me that Candyman wasn't a political film, and I was like, "Did you watch it?"
Wow. Wow.
So
Wow. Wow.
yeah, it's always movies like that where it's like, yeah, you can watch it and not pick up on the political stuff, but it doesn't mean it's not there.
Yep. Yep. All right, Molly. Well, it has been a blast having you on today. And I want to end things off with a couple of questions to try to get through all my guests here. So, first one for you. Think back to all the premieres you've gotten a chance to go and see for yourself, whether it's for something you were writing, podcast, whatever, or just you going and getting to see something. Over the life that you have lived, is there a horror movie premiere that you would love to go back and sit through that premiere again, get to enjoy whatever the audience was doing? And if there's not one that you would relive, is there a movie you could pull out that you would have loved to go on and see the premiere of that opening night? Anyone you could think of?
Oh man, that is so tough. The this is probably a really weird one to want to relive, especially for my reason. But I remember I went to an advanced screening of Annabelle Creation.
Okay.
And the reason I would want to go back, it was a totally packed house, like people were screaming and it was a fun time. But someone in the theater threw up all over the place. And I didn't notice it until I was walking out, and there was like just like the front section was just like covered with vomit. And this is so weird. I want to go back in time and relive it so I can actually see when that happens because I missed it, and I'm
Yeah.
sad that I missed it.
Was
Because
there,
you always hear stories about people like fainting or vomiting at horror movie premieres, and I've never actually seen it happen. So that was the closest I came to seeing it happen, but it was only the aftermath.
did you not like, do you not recall like even hearing anything when it would have happened?
No, and it's like I also when I I'm very sound sensitive when it comes to horror films. So I'm not someone who covers my eyes when I get scared. I actually cover my ears. So that could be part of why, because like I'm not gonna lie, that movie scared the crap out of me.
It's a good one. It's a good
And
one.
so I'm guessing that that's probably what happened, or it just happened at a part of the movie that was really loud. But yeah, I want to go back so I can pay attention and like keep my eye on where I remember it happening, so I can actually see it. So I can say I finally witnessed that happening at a premiere once.
Wow. Wow. Because you're absolutely right. People say that all the time. I have never
Yeah.
witnessed that myself. And I've been to many horror movies
Mm-hmm.
opening night. Not once. Not
Yeah.
once.
I've
Wow.
seen people walk out when they realize the kind of movie that they were in, especially at film festivals, because it's always old people that just buy tickets and they go into a horror movie, and as soon as they realize it's a horror movie, they get the hell out.
Yep.
But yeah, it's I just want to see it. I just want to see it happen once.
Oh man. All right. We got to will that into fruition then. We got to will it
Yeah.
to happen here. All right. And then my second question here for you is we've had so much good horror already here in 2024. Is there something on the docket right now that you are looking forward to over anything else? Could be a movie, TV show, book, whatever the case is. Is there something coming out this year that you are looking forward to?
I mean, honestly, there's so much good stuff that I feel like is coming out this year. But the first one that came to mind, probably just because we were talking about Nick Cage, I really want to see Longlegs.
Yeah.
Um, and that's one too that I've been, because I feel like trailers have gotten really, really bad recently where they just show way too much. So I know that there's been a couple more trailers that has come out since the initial teaser. I'm avoiding those like the plague. I don't want to see
Yep.
it. I don't want to know any more than I know. I love Nick Cage. I love Micah Monroe. I I'm just ready. And it just like it looks just the general premise and just the few images I've seen are enough that I am sold. But probably it's a toss up between that or I saw the TV Glow. I think that
Yeah, that
new
looks so
A24
good.
one looks so good. I
Yeah,
think it
it
has an
does.
amazing cast. I think just like the colors from the few images that I've seen look so cool. I'm a sucker for green and purple light in horror films, so
Yeah,
I'm
oh
I'm
God.
there. So
I'm
yeah,
so
those are probably
curious
the
because
top two.
you said it with like a few things we've talked about today here. Are you a person who very much like you don't want to do trailers? Like if there's something you're interested in, keep yourself in the dark as much as possible?
I when it comes to films like Arcadian, I feel like it's just because at when it's festival, I'm trying to see as many festival films as possible, so I just don't have time to look them up beforehand.
Gotcha.
But I feel like for example, I just went on a rant recently because there was a new trailer for Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes that I feel like gave away a huge plot point that I would have loved to have not known going into the movie because I didn't see it coming. And I
I'm
was
positive
really
I know what you're
mad.
talking about. I'm positive I know
Yeah.
the one you're talking about
I
too. Yeah.
like I was so mad. And that's something that happens a lot with films, but I feel like especially horror films in the trailer, they either give away too much or they show all the scariest scenes in the trailer. So then when it happens in the movie, it's not as impactful. So I'll
Yeah.
usually watch the first teaser trailer, but after
Mm.
that, I usually do my best to avoid trailers as much as possible because I don't want things spoiled for me. I want to be surprised.
Which makes me wonder, have you seen the trailer for Shyamalan's new film Trap yet?
Yes.
Okay.
See, that I feel like is a fake out because watching it, that was one where it's like, oh, I bet this is what's going to happen in the movie, and then they revealed what I thought was going to happen in the trailer. So
Yeah.
it's like, if they're revealing that in the trailer, I can't even imagine what the twist is going to be in that movie. Like it's going to be insane, and I can't wait. That's another one, now that you mentioned it, that I'm excited for, especially because I love Josh Hartnett. It's great to see him starring in a horror film again. Like, I'm ready
Yeah.
for it.
Oh man, let me tell you, like a week before that trailer came out, I was pissed because like somebody I follow on Twitter had released the synopsis for it, and I thought that was the twist. I was like, this
Oh
movie
yeah.
doesn't come out for 4 months. I'm gonna be like, I'm spoiled already. And then thank God, first 20 seconds of the trailer,
Yeah.
they already confirm it's like, okay, cool. So it's something, yeah, I'm with you. It's
Yeah.
something huge coming out of that
Yeah,
now.
if they're willing to reveal that just in the first images and trailer and stuff, like, you know, it's going to be insanity once it actually happens.
Absolutely. Oh my God. All right, Molly. Well, it has been such a joy having you on here tonight to get to talk about some of your work, talk about Arcadian, and talk about what you are looking forward to this year. Do you have anything that you'd like to plug for the viewers at home tonight?
Well, if you are interested in reading more of my Uterus Horror column, that is over on certifiedforgotten.com. Like I said, usually every month, sometimes not, but typically every month there's a new one. And also, I think right now the estimated release is in July, but don't quote me on that because it has changed a couple times. But I also co authored a book called Queer Horror, a Film Guide. And it is a very comprehensive guide with over 900 different films that are either feature queer stories, queer characters, queer filmmakers. And it's written by myself and a group of writers, and they're all amazing. And we're very excited to finally have it come out. Like I said, I'm pretty sure right now it's expected early July. It is available for pre-order, so hopefully that's when it comes out. But yeah, it's very excited about that, and excited to actually have it out in the world finally.
Hell yeah, we're gonna pre-order that too because we love showing our support. So y'all get those pre-orders up if you haven't already. Molly, thank you so much for being on the show today. And of course, 'cause I love bringing people back. I'm gonna have you back at some point later this year. We're gonna have to talk a little bit more horror. So appreciate you having you on the show today, folks. Make sure to hit that like and that subscribe button. Head on over. Make sure to check out Molly's fantastic series, Uterus Horror, on Certified Forgotten as well. Folks, my name is T. We've been here with friends talking scary movies. Stay scared.
Boy here is a big fan of Fangoria. So, if you want to check out the world's best horror magazine that's out there, get a chance to get yourself your own subscription, which I just got my first one back in 2022 and I don't regret it for a second. But if you want your own Fangoria subscription or you like the Fangoria merchandise, then head over to the Fangoria shop and use my link if you want to save yourself some money, folks. That's an easy one to remember. Just go to shop.fangoria.com/AXDEW. Again, that's shop.fangoria.com/AXDEW, or use my specific code AXDEW at checkout. You can save 20% off your entire order, and that implies 2 subscription and one-time orders as well. You don't want to miss out, folks, because with the magnitude of horror movies we've had released in the last few years, and with what we have on the horizon, Fangoria is going to be your #1 source for all that great, juicy, bloody information in the world of horror. So again, head to shop.fangoria.com. Hey there, folks! Thanks for tuning in to T Watch This Scary Movie. I appreciate you checking out another review or movie news, whether we're talking movies, TV shows, books, or games, whatever, it's all scary. Remember, you can check out new episodes every Wednesday night at 8:30 p.m. Mountain Standard Time on the YouTube page for video. That's youtube.com/C/Theron Reynolds Scary Movie. Again, youtube.com/C/Theron Reynolds Scary Movie. And you can check out the audio version on all your favorite podcasting platforms. Just search T Watch the Scary Movie or TWASM. Don't forget, my name is T. We've been talking scary movies. Stay scared.